So you may or may not remember the last time we drove the Chevy Dually. That terrible noise comes from the fact that we just chewed up the only belt that was running the water pump, and the truck has been overheating for I'm not really sure how long. It left us stranded in downtown Las Vegas, me without a shirt on, after it shredded I don't know, probably the 5th freaking belt that it shredded. We're a hell of a family out here. I'm shirtless in a gas station pouring water into my truck, and my son's pissing on a bush over there with his pants fully around his ankles. We're fixing that this time today on Burnouts and Rotor Blades. Welcome to the Burnouts and Rotor Blades YouTube channel. Let's go do something awesome. The truck had a problem whenever I took it out last, where it overheated because the alternator belt shredded, because the giant alternator that's on it that we need to run the electric fans that are on it, it just couldn't do it with one belt. The problem that I was having was the belt was slipping whenever the alternator was under load. All right, so if we're looking in here, you know, I don't have the belt at all anymore because it is just completely shredded, and it actually left chunks of the rubber over here. So I'm gonna start it up real quick, flip it around, get it into the garage. Yeah, let's go ahead and check to see if there's water in the oil first, or if there's even oil. Yeah, that oil looks fine. What does it smell like? It smells like oil. Get in your home. Why are you? Okay, let's check the radiator. Make sure it doesn't have oil in the radiator. Barely has water in the radiator, but there's some there, so that will be just fine if it starts. Hey mister, are you ready? You gotta spot me into the garage. You're the one that tells me if I'm going too far or not. All right, he's a good spotter. Nailed it. Are you done fixing this thing yet?
No.
Why not?
Started.
Huh?
You just started.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. I thought you were gonna fix it. I didn't know I was gonna have to fix it.
No, you're definitely fixing it.
You broke it.
No, you broke it. You're the one that drives cars.
All right, it's hard to argue with that. Now in the 1980s, Chevy had minimal power requirements. They didn't require a huge alternator in order to support a carburetor and some brake lights. As vehicles started to become more inundated with electronics, fuel injection, emissions control, OBD2 computers, more advanced radios, in addition to electric fans and all kinds of other gadgets and gizmos that keep getting added to the vehicles, Chevy ran into this problem too, where they had a bigger alternator coming on board, and they needed to be able to run it on a belt without it slipping. One single V-belt on a small pulley like this just could not handle that load being generated by it. It didn't have enough contact surface. I could have used a much bigger pulley, which would have had a much bigger contact surface, and that would have probably kept the belt from slipping, but it also would have made it to where my alternator didn't charge at idle, so I need to maintain a certain RPM. I could have added a second V-belt to the alternator pulley. They make double V-belt alternator pulleys. How many belts do you want to add? So Chevy came up with this brilliant design for the 454 and the small block 350s that use a combination setup. Part of it being what they call a flat belt, which is just a serpentine belt, and then 2 V-belts. The 2 V-belts will run the power steering pump and the AC pump, which do just fine on a single V-belt, but then this flat belt, or this 5-rib belt, will run alternator, water pump, smog pump, and main pulley only on that right side circuit. And the idea was you could increase your belt's grip strength by making the belt wider instead of just adding 2 belts. So this was an in-between, and eventually Chevy did away with this and went to a full serpentine setup on pretty much all of their vehicles. The only reason that I didn't go full on serpentine was because I have already spent a bunch of money on the AC system for this. I wasn't willing to spend all that money and time and effort on this AC system again, which you would have to do if you swapped over to the serpentine setup. First thing we're gonna have to do is mess with the AC pump. We're gonna have to get this belt right here off. Oh, there we go. Daddy always wins in the end. Next step's gonna be loosen up this big Herkin bolt right here. which I have clearly grabbed the wrong size for it. And take a breaker bar. There's a little flange, and then you can just kind of move this guy out of your way as you need to. Okay. Well, that's off now. That was only 20 minutes of something that should have taken 8 seconds. Once we get this loosened up, then we can go on to removing the water pump pulley. I spaced them out lock washers, that's stupid. The pulley off the alternator. I have this O2 bung sensor wrench that I've modified pretty heavily. Center section is a 10 mil. All right, that thing's gone. And then eventually the main pulley down there. Oh no, I dropped something. And we'll replace those 3 pulleys and then move on to putting all the belts back on. Still need to go by the parts store and get the proper size belt. It should be the one that's from a 91 Chev pickup, but I'll probably give you an exact part number later in the video because that's just how I roll. So I'm at a salvage yard, an LKQ or something like that in California, and if you're wondering what that smell is, it's homeless people feces and wildfires burning wildly out of control. What we're here for is this. Is a once 454 powered Suburban. And the reason we're here for it is because of some very specific pulleys. And whenever I walked up, I was pretty sad to see that the engine's gone. So a little bit of walking around and taking a look, and all the core support and all that stuff for it is actually right down there. The primary pulley that I'm going to take is this water pump pulley. These are very hard to get. They stopped making them in the US in 2012 and in 2009 in Canada. And like I said, they're very, very difficult to come by. But the crank pulley's gone, so we're just going to have to make do with this. I just want to give a shout out to the guy at the front gate here that has his little flea market set up and was willing to sell me this fine tool kit for $20 because I didn't bring any wrenches with me. Alright, so here is the stock one that came from my 84 Chev C30, and this is the 90s. It's 89, 91, and came on several different 454s. But you can see the difference here. The difference is essentially the same if you go this way with it, except for this top pulley. So everything else lines up. The hat's the same height and everything. If you go over here, you look at the holes, you see that the hole is the same in the center, and the bolt pattern lines up all the way through. So this is going to work. Now the only other thing I'm going to talk about is for these bolts, because they're going into the engine block and I do not want this thing to come loose, we're going to apply just a dab of, someone help me, just a dab of blue Loctite on each one of these bolts so it doesn't go anywhere when we put it into the pulley. The main pulley part number and the water pump part number, smog pumps part number. The alternator just has a 964 there, and then this spacer goes behind the alternator. One of the snags I ran into was the alternator pulley itself. This specific alternator pulley, which is for this set of pulleys off of the 454 from the late 80s. This would not work because of the offset that this has and the shaft diameter. I ordered a PowerMaster, whatever it is, 150 from the internet. I did have to create a spacer. I found a thick washer and I bored the center of it out with a unibit and it worked just fine. Do a test fit and make sure this is gonna fit. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. No interference. All right, use this opportunity to winner, winner, chicken dinner. That's correct. Are you mocking me right now? I kind of feel like you're mocking me a little bit. Would you like a knuckle sandwich, mister? The next thing you should do whenever you're doing something like this, setting up pulleys, is always get out, your some kind of a straight edge, hold it up against your main pulley, and then you can see how far away your other pulleys are. And that's really important because you need the belt to track properly. In order for it to track properly, all your pulleys have to be true, especially with a flat belt. A V belt is pretty forgiving, a flat belt is not forgiving. You can see that these don't quite line up. And you can also see that the water pump pulley is a little bit back from the main pulley. So somebody spaced out the water pump pulley here, and that's fine. Just put some washers behind the actual pulley face. So I followed suit on that. Let's take a straight edge and hold it against the front of the pulleys. And that is within a 1/16 of an inch. I'm gonna say that's good. And that is not the right size belt. Okay, well, that's the wrong size. Back to the parts store we go. After like 11 or 45 trips to the parts store, the part number we settled on for this is a 6K495. It is a 50-inch belt, 50 inches, 6 rib. And it does give us just enough that we can tighten it down later if we need to. First thing we're gonna do is tighten down our AC pump. Now that our AC pump belt is pretty tight, we'll just go ahead and tighten down power steering pump. And that's pretty simple. That's relatively tight. That's pretty tight. This is tight. That's tightish. We've got everything locked down and bolted in. So really the only thing left to do is start it up. I've set this camera up over here so you should be able to see, you know, if it flings the belt off, you'll be the first ones to see. So let me find my keys and then we're gonna go start this guy up. This is definitely a vehicle that I've wanted for a long time. I've always thought dualies are super cool. So to finally have one is awesome, but at the same time, to have one that's been worked on by somebody else and now I'm chasing their problems. Very annoyingly, this thing is still squealing. So I'm gonna give it a little bit more love. Okay, it's snug. All right, oil pressure came up right away. It looks maybe like it's charging. I love that sound. It sounds so sweet. It sounds like it's got a big cam, but it doesn't. It's just cold. Belts are all there. They're running relatively true. So it's this aftermarket alternator that really is causing all the problems. But this is a perfect setup. So I was concerned back there that that belt would be rubbing on the back of the pulley. And it might very well be, but it looks like it's well within the range of self-clearancing. So it's back. The truck is back. Everything's working good. I've been driving it around for a while and the temperature gauge is perfectly happy where it's at. Charging, doesn't matter what I do with the throttle pedal. Before, if I revved it up, the belt would slip and then you could see the amps drop off, but that doesn't happen anymore. Oil pressure still looks good, so I don't think I overheated it too bad. The clock it doesn't work. But that the temperature gauge has been staying where it's at for probably 20 minutes that I've been driving now, and it's gone down a bit since I turned the heater on. It is a bit chilly in Vegas. I think it's down in the upper 60s, so that's pretty cold for us out here. My hat's off to you guys that live where that, you know, white stuff falls out of the sky. I don't know if I could do it. Now we can get on to doing airbags to support the back end of this thing and a C-notch. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate all the support that you guys give and the likes, subscribes, the comments on it. Feel free to ask questions. This truck build is also on some online forums. I encourage you guys to reach out to the forums. They're a lost thing that people are forgetting about. YouTube videos are awesome, but Facebook and the forums is where I tracked down those pulleys in the first place, and a shout out to the guy that sent me those pulleys. I really appreciate that. The next problem is the battery is exploded, and Optima is just steaming out of the top of it. Just as a public service announcement, if you're in a junkyard and you need to use a porta potty, I'm just going to tell you it's a life-changing experience, one that I would not recommend doing ever again. So I'm gonna go cry now.